Check out this massive bridge building machine in action. It's like a colossal crane that lifts the gigantic beams from the casting yard. These beams weigh thousands of tons, by the way, and then it moves them to where they need to be and plops them right in place. This is how China whips up those super speedy 215 miles per hour train bridges over water. China's been on a wild ride, learning to build skyscrapers in just 19 days, hospitals in 10 days, and housing blocks in a lightning-fast 24 hours. This country had built more railways than other countries altogether. But wait, there's more. How did China go from being a small village to a global construction powerhouse? Why is this only the beginning? What's the deal with the African Union Conference Center in Ethiopia, the Habam Tode International Port in Sri Lanka, and the Pacific Project in Brooklyn? Well, it's the Chinese who built or chipped in big time on this project. Now let's focus on Africa. Ever wondered how many countries have ongoing construction projects with Chinese companies? The answer is almost all of them, except for a small one called Eswatini. Nigeria, for example, got a cool $5 billion for its largest power plant. Mozambique's biggest bridge? Yep, Chinese built. And that super long railway spanning over 350 miles in Kenya? That was the Chinese too. Fun fact, they claim to build it at a pace of 0.4 miles a day. But it's not just Africa. Even Cabo Verde has Chinese fingerprints all over it. They've been constructing houses, dams, and stadiums there. And you might wonder, how much do they rake in from all these projects in Africa? Well, it was $2.5 billion back in 2003. Not bad, right? But now, it's a whopping 20 times more. $50 billion a year. But why China? And why Africa? Well, the logic is simple. China sees more opportunities than dollar signs in this project. They're faster and cheaper, and they're even willing to give you credit. Now it makes sense why they're so busy in Africa, doesn't it? Okay, let's dive into some examples. Check out these Chinese drillers working on tunnels for railroads and subways. They often in pretty extreme conditions, like tunneling through mountains and crazy heights and depth with low oxygen. With these machines, they can dig 10 meters a day, and it only costs $10 million for every half mile. In the US, that same work would cost $50 million. Speaking of working with debt, let's talk about Sri Lanka. 15 years ago, they wanted to build a deep water port for their development, but they were short on cash. So they asked Europe and the US for help, but got a big fat no. China stepped in, but things didn't go as planned, and Sri Lanka ended up owing China over $1 billion. And you know what the Chinese partner did? They offered to forgive the debt in exchange for a 99-year lease. Sri Lanka agreed, and now part of their territory belongs to another country. The same thing could have happened in Kenya with its Mombasa port, but it's a different story there. China isn't relying on military might for world domination. They're using strategic debt. They've leaped ahead in no time at all. In the 60s, Japan was the one turning heads with its economy, technology, and construction. China, on the other hand, was all about portraits of its leaders and communist slogans. My Japan episode explains that boom and fall. Check it out. Now let's crunch some numbers. In 1980, only 20% of China's population lived in cities. The rest, a whopping 800 million people, lived in suburbs, earning less than $2 a day with low work performance. But that was a massive pool of cheap labor. All the Chinese government had to do was figure out how to put it to use. Deng Xiaoping looked at Singapore and brought the experiment back to China. Here's a fascinating story. A tiny fishing village with 30,000 people turned into Chinese Silicon Valley with 12 million residents in just 40 years. How did they do it? Deng Xiaoping made Shenzhen a tax-free zone for foreign companies and investors. This way, they poured money into constructions using China's cheap labor. Why Shenzhen? It's super close to Hong Kong and Taiwan, both of which were booming economically. Over those 40 years, Shenzhen GDP shot up by 20% each year, from $40 million to a staggering $400 billion. This approach not only gave China's economy a boost, but also advanced construction and technology. To connect cities in this vast country, China didn't go shopping for foreign technology, they imported it. In just 70 years, they spent $300 billion to build 25,000 miles of railroads, more than the rest of the world combined. Take the CRH 380, for example. It's a series of trains that hit speeds of 300 miles per hour. Developed in partnership with German Siemens, Bombardier, and Japanese Hitachi, these trains are produced solely in China. Sure, all these railroad investments might never pay off, but they've supercharged technology development in China. Skyscrapers, anyone? In the past 3 decades, China has built as many as the entire US managed in the 20th century. Check out the top 10 tallest buildings globally, and half of them are Chinese-made. What about the top 50 cities with the most skyscrapers? More than half are in China. Big Chinese cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Tianjin, and Beijing all have their record-breaking buildings. And about 7 years ago, China showed the world they could build not only the tallest, but also the fastest. A 57-story building in Changsha went up in just 19 days. How did they do it? No concrete, just a steel frame. Every part was produced in the factory and assembled like giant Lego bricks. China even had grand plans for the tallest building in the world with 220 floors to be constructed in just 90 days. Or 210 days if you count the foundation. But out of nowhere, the Chinese government said no to buildings over 0.3 miles tall, or 0.15 miles in smaller cities, and just 0.06 miles in the tiniest ones. Why the change? Check out this shaky building in Shenzhen and you will understand. All this speed and height came at the cost of safety. In those 40 years of rapid growth, China's wealthy elite multiplied. They no longer wanted to live in glass and steel skyscrapers, they craved green surroundings. And it's not just about seeking opportunities, they've got the money and technology to make it happen. Back to Africa, where China is shifting from economic influence to political power. Less wealthy countries need tech and infrastructure to compete with their neighbors. China's low prices, speedy approach, and credit options become pretty attractive. So, countries that work with China could become the next Kenya, Sri Lanka, or Ecuador. Speaking of Ecuador, a few years ago, China quickly built a hydroelectric power station. All was well, until some serious cracks appeared, causing regular floods in nearby villages. Add to that a $1.7 billion credit line from the Bank of China and $125 million in annual interest. The result? 80% of Ecuador's oil production now belongs to China. To sum it up, China invested $300 billion in Africa, but because of those debts, most of the factories, railroads, ports, and dams financed by China are still under Chinese control. Millions of Chinese workers own these projects, but the local governments put the operating costs, and local workers don't see much of the profits. China's expansion and emigration will keep growing because they're running out of resources at home. More than half of China's population now lives in urban areas. They're heavily investing in technology and construction and taking full advantage of less wealthy countries. This teaches all of us to play smart and strategic. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it to support my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon.